have communicated in no uncertain terms with every player in the region that that's a red line for us, and that there would be enormous consequences if we start seeing movement on the chemical weapons front or the use of chemical weapons.
Talking about red lines, I'm not having a debate or conversation about red lines, or I'm not setting red lines. Let's not talk about red today.
So you're saying They'll be held accountable. It's been a year.
Well, it has been. And we are in a circumstance where the Assad regime is still in power, but you have a large segment of the international community aligned against them. You have the United States of America providing assistance to the opposition. This is a situation that is ongoing.
Here's what the president said before going into Libya in 2011.
To brush aside America's responsibility as a leader, and more profoundly our responsibilities to our fellow human beings under such circumstances, would have been a betrayal of who we are. Some nations may be able to turn a blind eye to atrocities in other countries. The United States of America is different. And as president, I refuse to wait for the images of slaughter and mass graves before taking action.
There have been many bad situations that the U.S., Charles, has decided we had to act. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs writes in a letter to Congressman Eliot Engel, quote, "Syria today is not about choosing between two sides, but rather about choosing among many sides. It's my belief that the side we choose must be ready to promote their interests and ours when the balance shifts in their favor. Today they are not." But Congressman Engel, a Democrat, responded, quote, "I reject the notion that our involvement in Syria would simply constitute choosing sides between one armed group and another. Rather, our involvement represents a choice between hastening the end of the Assad regime or continuing to allow the cycle of violence, displacement, and terror to continue unabated."
Well, the irony is they're both right. Engel is right that particularly had we early in the Civil War put our efforts on behalf of the rebels before the jihadists flooded in from Iraq and from Afghanistan and elsewhere, and when the bulk of the rebellion was spontaneous, secular, national, is from every segment population, we would have had a decisive influence and Assad would be gone. Right now we're in a situation where the jihadists are in, where there are more than two sides, and any aid would be problematic. I think Dempsey is right. The irony is, second irony, that in Egypt, where there are only two sides, there's only the Brotherhood and there's only the military with wide popular support, we're not choosing either. And I think, in fact, the administration's incoherence on policy is astounding. The tape you showed of Obama speaking about the intervention in Libya and using a humanitarian explanation and justification shows how completely incoherent the policy is. The only constant in all of this is Obama, as a candidate, as a senator, decided we should be out of these wars, we should be out of the Middle East. The tide of war is receding. He repeats it over and over again and pretends it's true. And that is the constant. We're not in Iraq, we're not in Syria, we're not in Libya, we're getting killed in Libya as we did. We're not in Egypt, we are doing nothing. All the other actors are in play, the jihadists, the Russians, the Iranians, Hezbollah, but not the United States. We are irrelevant.
You know, when you were gone Monday, Juan sat in that seat, and he said support the military in Egypt.
Absolutely.
Well, he tried to outflank me on the right, and I'm utterly scandalized. And it's not going to work, Juan.
It won't work.
You're not going to get the seat.
All right. I wasn't after it, Charles.
Do you have any reaction to the Christopher Lane case?
I'm not familiar with it, actually.
In Oklahoma, this 22-year-old Australian who is out on a jog, and this young man apparently told the police they were bored and they thought it would just be fun to kill him. Any reaction to that?
Well, just that this sounds like a pretty tragic case. I wouldn't want to get ahead of the legal process here. The president, I think, himself has spoken pretty eloquently about violence in our communities.
Why hasn't he spoken out on this, in this case? You said there was a judicial proceeding. There was one in the Trayvon Martin case. He spoke out extensively on that one.
I think that he answered it.
He was in the Rose Garden?
Yeah, he got asked a
Yeah.
question about it.
And he didn't have to answer, but he did. And then he came out here himself.
At the conclusion of the legal process, and shared some thoughts.
For several minutes.
Sure. That are, I think, where he expressed his concerns about the impact of violence in communities all across the country.
I'm glad that not only is the Justice Department looking into it, I understand now that the governor of the state of Florida has formed a task force to investigate what's taking place. I think all of us have to do some soul searching to figure out how does something like this happen. You know, if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon. And, you know, I think they are right to expect that all of us as Americans are going to take this with the seriousness it deserves, and that we're going to get to the bottom of exactly what happened.
Australia has obviously weighed in, and they're urging citizens not to go to the U.S.
Look, I think that's one reason we should look at this, because when you do have an innocent, lovely young man who's a student here, who's a ball player here, and he's destroyed, his life is literally destroyed for no reason at all, and it does affect another country. I think that's something that ought to be addressed. The world looks at that and says, is it safe to come to America? But I think the worst part about this, the most disturbing part, is the sort of the murder from anomie, the murder from the boredom. This is absolute evil when you kill for no reason. Killing for reasons goes all the way back to the Bible. You know, that's as old as humanity, and it's obviously evil that we deal with at some level, and we try to find extenuating circumstances. They can be none here. They had no idea who the guy was. They simply wanted, apparently, from what they said, to kill for the sake of killing. And that is extremely chilling. I don't know that anything a president would say would make a difference, but that's what I find most disturbing of all.
This has been a Sunfish production.